Hello, my friends. We are living through some very interesting times, and I think it is only natural that when we are activated, when we are afraid, when we are worried, when we are concerned, when we are confused, when we are overwhelmed, all of those things, we become a lot more rigid in our thinking. And this is a tendency that people all over the political spectrum can have. And one of the things that I have been doing a lot of coaching on with myself and others has been how to relate to people who aren't sharing our opinions about what's going on. And it's sort of easy if you're very far apart from someone in their opinions of current events to kind of fantasize that if the person, if your parents, if your spouse, if your sibling, if your friends, if your boss, whatever, had the same political opinions you do, then it would all be so much easier. And like decision making would be easier and you would feel closer and more connected to them. And you wouldn't be angry at them, right? That everything would be so great if they were just more similar to you. But what I have found in my own life and what I am able to coach about so well because of it is that even when someone is very close to the same page as you, if you are activated and you are not coaching yourself, you can be as upset about a small difference as about a big one. And I experienced this recently with my husband, where even though my husband has very similar political stances as I do, we share a lot, 98% of the same values and opinions about sort of big picture political questions. We have most of the same opinions about current events. Like, we're very aligned. I still was absolutely furious because I had the belief that in, a place that we did have a disagreement or that we didn't see the same intensity or severity of something, that sort of gap meant something bad about him. And in particular, I was making it mean that he wasn't taking the situation seriously because he didn't have the exact same opinion that I do. And I talk about this some in my episode on my top lessons from turning 43. When I worked through what was going on, I realized that really my underlying assumption unconsciously was, if you were thinking about this the right way, you would have the exact same opinion as me. Not close to the same opinion, not almost the same opinion, not similar opinion, but a little different idea about the level of severity, or not similar opinion, but a little different idea about what to do about it. Like, if you were taking it seriously and thinking about it correctly, you would have the exact same opinion that I have, and you would want to do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. And I think a lot of us have that assumption underlying the way we're thinking about things always, but especially right now when things feel unpredictable or chaotic. So I thought it was a really good time to revisit this episode. I had to revisit my own episode called You Are Not the Reference Point. Because, all kidding aside, I think that's really important. Like, we have to know how to maintain an ability to see other points of view and maintain our connections to people. And for some of us, it may seem like it's a very big gap to bridge. Some of us, it may look from the outside like it's smaller, but as those of us in those relationships know, it can feel just as big from the inside, because when we're in that mental state, when we are activated in that way, we're not being rational, we're not being empathetic, we are being very rigid in our thinking, and we are assuming that the way that we see and analyze something is the right way, and that no one else could be smart or taking it seriously if they are not coming to that exact same conclusion we are. But that is a denial of other people's autonomy, right? That's a denial of just the fact of the world, that other people have free thought and get to think about things and perceive things differently than we do, and may even share a lot of our beliefs and yet come to different conclusions. So we all have to make our own decisions about how to be in relationship with people, or not be in relationship with people who disagree with us on different things. But I think this episode is very timely in helping us make those decisions from a grounded, wise place, if we're going to make them, as opposed to from an activated and blinders on egocentric place that so many of us are acting from right now. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to previous Kara, who taught all about this in this episode. Welcome to Unfuck Your Brain. I'm your host, Kara Lowenthal, Master Certified Coach and founder of the School of New Feminist Thought. I'm here to help you turn down your anxiety, turn up your confidence, and create a life on your own terms, one that you're truly excited to live. Let's go. So today I want to teach you a concept you may have heard from your parents growing up in a different way if you had parents like mine, because my parents were certainly fond of telling myself and my siblings that we were not the center of the world or the center of the universe, depending on how grandiose we were going. By which they meant not everything that was happening revolved around us and our preferences, which is accurate, right? But today I want to extend that concept in this teaching that I call You Are Not the Reference Point. It's a little bit different than center of the world, right? Center of the world is kind of about like thinking that anything anyone does is about you and that you're the most important thing in the world. I don't think most women think they're the most important thing in the world. Women are not really socialized to think that. But we do all, just humans, subconsciously believe that we are the reference point. I'm going to explain what I mean about that in this episode. And I think it's the single biggest obstacle to clear communication and perceiving other people accurately and unconditional acceptance and love. So here's what I mean by this. It's simple to explain, but you have to really work to grasp it on a deeper level, and that's when it will change your whole life. So before we know about thought work, we generally assume our thoughts are true, right? Or like at least there's some basis in reality out in the world for us to be thinking them. I think commonly we have subconscious beliefs about our own thoughts, such as, well, I wouldn't think this unless it were true, right? We'll often be sort of like, well, why would I come up with that unless there was evidence for it? Like, why would I come up with that unless the outside world was suggesting this, right? Or like the facts suggest it's true. Or I think sometimes we subconsciously believe like, well, I wouldn't think this unless it was possible or probable, right? We sort of assume the rationality and the objectivity of our own thoughts. We basically just believe that if we came up with a thought, it's because something in the outside world gave us a reason to do that. So when we learn about thought work, we start to question that, which is a very important positive first step. But what we still often don't see is the ways in which we are taking our own experience of the world, our own norms, our own ideas of what's obvious or standard or sensible, our own interpretations. We're taking all of those things as the reference point. Here's what I mean by that. How often have you said something like, well, if I were doing this project, this is what I would do. Or if I were in this relationship, this is how I would think about it. Well, if I were dating someone and I liked them, this is how I would behave. Or if I was in charge of that initiative, this is what I would do. Or if I were the boss, this is how I would behave, right? Or if my kid was saying, this thing, this is what I would do. Every time you think something like that, you're measuring other people's behavior against what you think you would do or think or feel or say in their shoes. But when you do that, you are not actually putting yourself in their shoes because your perspective is still created and limited by your own thoughts and ideas. So at best, you're wearing one of their shoes and one of your shoes, right? Or you've walked into their house, but you're still wearing your shoes, right? You're trying to reconcile this conflict in what you're seeing and how it's different from what you think a person would do, right? And you're still thinking about their life or their decisions or their behavior or their words or whatever from the perspective of your own thoughts and assumptions. If you are loving the podcast and what you're learning here, then you are going to absolutely die for my book, Take Back Your Brain: How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out. I truly believe that this book became an instant national bestseller because it is so concrete and actionable and illuminating so that you actually are learning why your brain is the way it is and you're learning how to change it. I wrote every single word myself. I read the audiobook myself. So if you are loving the podcast, you are going to love the book. And the book is really a one-stop shop for how to understand exactly why your brain works the way it does and how to actually change it. You can get it wherever books are sold, and you're going to be able to take this work so much deeper and learn so many new concepts and tools and exercises that aren't part of the podcast, because that's how publishing contracts work, that I just know that if you love the podcast, you're going to love the book too. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The one I'm going to start with is one that comes from my own life. And this is the kind of the point where I really realized this on a deeper level. So a while ago, I dated someone briefly whose communication style was extremely different from mine. I am a big texter, like with friends, if I'm dating someone with my siblings, like I'm very verbal. I'm usually home alone anyway, even when there isn't a pandemic. I grew up reading Victorian novels. Like I just really like communicating in the written word. So if I'm, close with someone friendship wise or romantically, I will usually text with them pretty often. Someone I'm dating at least once a day, some of my closest friends multiple times a week, occasionally skipping a day. It's not a fixed rule, but that's like my natural inclination. Okay. This person's natural inclination was to take anywhere from 3 to 7 days just to respond to a text. So obviously the first several times this happened, I assumed the person was ghosting because in my brain, it was just impossible to believe that someone could be legitimately romantically interested in someone else and nevertheless text them back 7 days later. Like to me, that was impossible, right? My thought process was if you like someone, you would want to be in communication with them. When I like someone, I want to be in communication with them. If you like someone, you would text them back sooner, right? It was all being judged from my perspective. So the first level was coaching myself to see, okay, it's conceptually possible, right? The fact that I wouldn't operate this way when I like someone didn't mean anything. Because honestly, I wouldn't operate this way even if I didn't like someone. I respond to texts from people I don't really have anything to do with much quicker than that. But the next level is where I really felt this click at a deeper level. I realized that the way I was coaching myself, and I see this so much in my students, which is why I want to teach you this concept, was framed as like, I can believe it's possible for someone to not text back for 3 or 5 or 7 days, even if they like someone. Okay, so pop quiz, what is wrong with that framing? It's the even if. That even if is so subtle and sneaky, but it's doing so much work in the sentence, right? The sentence is, okay, I can believe it's possible for someone to not text back for a week, even if they like someone. That even if is implying that it's abnormal to be this way, right? That the normal thing is texting back in whatever amount of time I think is normal, right? And then like I'm going to use my thought work to contemplate that someone could like me and still behave abnormally. You see what I'm saying? That even if implies that however I would do things or my assumptions about what's acceptable or normal are like the standard. And so I'm going to bend in my brain to see how it's possible that sort of I don't have to make a particular meaning out of somebody else acting abnormally, right? It's like, oh, that's still weird and abnormal, but I don't have to make it mean that they don't like me. But the thought that it's abnormal is the whole problem. The whole problem is the thought that my way of doing things is standard or normal, and this person's way of doing things was a deviation from that. Right? So this is what I mean when I say that even when we are doing thought work or coaching ourselves, in so many unconscious ways, we still assume that our way of doing things, our way of thinking, our way of relating is the standard, right? We think we are the normal ones and that whatever we would think of or come up with is the normal thing. And so like we're willing to contemplate the idea that someone might possibly be different from us. And our idea of sort of being open to that is like allowing that to be kind of an acceptable deviation from the norm. But that's not the reframe that will blow your mind, right? The reframe that blows your mind happens when you realize that you're not the standard. You're not the reference point. Your point of view is not the main point of view from which you should just stretch your brain to see if you can imagine how someone else might deviate, right? In fact, your point of view is inherently limited and it doesn't even account for or contemplate many, many other ways of thinking and feeling and doing that humans have. And so if you start to look for this, you'll see there are so many examples in your life where you're watching the way someone else acts and you're thinking about how you just can't imagine why or how they would act that way. And your thought is always along the lines of like, well, anyone would know to do it this way or that way, right? Anyone would know to think about it this way or that way. But the truth is, it's not anyone. When we think like, well, a normal person, or shouldn't they be in touch within this amount of time? Or if someone knows this happened to me, shouldn't they reach out in this way or whatever else? It's always just you, right? It's not anyone. It's not everyone who would see it that way. It's just you. You would think or feel or act differently than whoever the other person is because of your thoughts. But you're not the reference point. You're not the standard. Your way of thinking and your way of doing things are not the norm. They're not the obvious or sane or reasonable thing against which other people should be measured. This is such a destructive mental habit, and it's one reason that I think venting to your friends can be such a bad idea, right? Compared to getting coached by objective peers like we do in the clutch, where you, and coaches, of course, too, who don't share your biases and are coaching you from outside of them. So here's the thing, your friends all generally agree with you about shit already. That's why you're friends. You've met a lot of people in your life who didn't agree with you about things, and you're often not friends with them, right? You and your friends have similar values. You have similar communication preferences and styles, or at least close enough to maintain a friendship. You have similar priorities. You have similar interests. You have similar habits, right? So when you say to your friends, can you believe that my boss didn't see I was upset and didn't ask me why, right? I mean, don't you think anyone with a shred of human compassion would have noticed that and said something to show me that they care? Your friends all nod along and are like, yeah, that boss is an asshole. Anybody with any shred of human decency would have said something to you. How can they be so insensitive, right? They all believe all your same bullshit. They have similar perspectives to you. And they're also just trying to validate you because that's what people think friends are supposed to do. But meanwhile, possibly the truth is your boss did notice, but didn't say anything because their thought, which is very different from your thought, their thought was, oh, it looks like something's going on with her, but I don't want to make her uncomfortable and ask her about something personal. It's not really my business as her boss, and I don't want her to feel pressured to share with me. So I'm just going to treat her like a professional and show that I know she can do her job, and I'm just going to keep the subject on work. And that's the most polite, discreet thing I can do. See what I mean? Two totally different ways of thinking about the same situation. But when you frame what you would like or what you would do as like the norm that any good feeling thinking human would do, you're just stuck in your own perspective and you create all of this story and meaning about other people and them being sort of beyond or outside the pale or the norm or the acceptable when really it's just your perspective, right? I see this come up a lot in dating in a lot of different ways, but even just on first dates, I often have women clients who will complain that a man didn't ask them any questions. And I have talked to many men who say, I don't ask questions because that seems like prying. I assume if somebody wants to share something with me, they will. And I don't want to ask them personal questions if they haven't wanted to volunteer that information. I'm not saying that's always gendered, but I do think women are socialized to draw people out with questions and express interest that way. And men are less so. Totally different thought process, right? But when you're sitting there on the date thinking to yourself, this guy's so self-centered, or this woman's, or whoever, this person's so self-centered, what an asshole. Anybody knows you should ask questions to draw people out. Well, no, not necessarily, right? I mean, I ask a lot of questions. I was raised by a New York Jewish family of lawyers. I ask a lot of questions, possibly like a cross-examination. I had a partner who grew up in the Midwest in a very different cultural context, and he thought asking questions was prying. But if I'd had that mindset, I never would have gotten to know him, right? When you try to reason about how other people should behave from your own premises, you're assuming that your brain and the way you see things are the reference point. They're the standard. And the farther away someone else's behavior gets from your reference point, the more inexplicable or outrageous you think it is. Have you ever had this experience? I've definitely had this experience in relationships, and I'm sure you have too, especially in romantic relationships, where you're mad at someone, so you kind of start the fight, and then you're shocked to find out that they're mad at you, right? Often about the same thing, where you totally think you were the wounded, injured party, and they think the same thing, right? That's exactly what's happening. You both think you're the reference point and that the other person's behavior was inexplicable or unacceptable from your own premises. The more you can practice decentering yourself as a reference point in your own mind, the more you will be able to see, right? When you stop assuming you're the reference point, you can see so much more clearly. You'll be able to see people for who they are and how their minds actually work. You will stop taking other people's behavior personally because you stop running it through your own assumptions and biases. This doesn't mean that you don't still make decisions about relationships, right? or friendships or jobs or anything else. But it means you make them from a place of truly not attaching any meaning to the other person's behavior or resisting it and thinking it means that they're wrong and bad and abnormal. And the irony is that makes it way easier to make decisions about how to relate to other people. When you're really stuck in your own reference point and you're seeing the other person through your own lens of all of your own assumptions and prejudices and biases, and I don't even mean those in a negative way, just all of your values and ideas and assumptions and presumptions and thoughts and preferences, all those data points that make up you. When you're seeing someone through that lens, it's unavoidable that they just become a green screen for your projections about yourself. You can't possibly see them clearly, right? You're just looking through so much clutter of your own assumptions. You can't possibly see clearly when you're viewing them through this lens of your own impossibly complicated mix of ideas and beliefs and values and feelings. If you think about it, it's like your whole personality is made up of 53 million unique pixels, right? Where all those pixels are genetics and evolution and family and thoughts and preferences and values and beliefs and what you read and your friends and schooling, right? All the influences, moments of your life that have created you. And then you look at somebody else who's a whole different 53 million unique little pixels of all of those things, and you expect that they should look the same. But your 53 million isn't any more objective or normal or standard than theirs. So you really have to stop thinking about other people's behavior through the lens of, well, if I really thought this, I would do that. If I cared about a person, I would do that. If I were their boss, I would do that. Anybody who was trying to parent would do this. Anybody who felt this way would do that. If I were in that circumstance, I would think and do this. You have to stop thinking about it that way. You're not the reference point. If you let go of your grip on the fixed point, you will actually be able to float freely. You will see so much more, and it will become much easier, not only to navigate the relationships in your life that you do want or need to stay in, but to let go of others because you see so clearly that it's just two different, totally acceptable ways of thinking about the world. And the question is just whether they're compatible and you want to spend time with them, right? Rather than making one of them wrong and bad and then being in resistance to it. So start watching out for how often you're thinking, well, if I were in that position, or if I had that relationship, or if I had that thought, or if I saw somebody was upset, or if I knew my partner liked this is what I would do, right? Think about it this way. Who cares what the fuck you would do? When you're trying to understand someone else's behavior, the question of what you would do is irrelevant. Question is, what are they thinking? And when you ask that question, you can actually learn and expand and grow your consciousness and your awareness of all the different ways of being. And you will come to understand other people so much more deeply. And you'll come to understand yourself so much more deeply, which is always what we're after here. All right, my chickens, none of you are the reference points, but I love you all anyway. Have a good week. If you're loving what you're learning on the podcast, you have got to come check out the Feminist Self-Help Society. It's our newly revamped community and classroom where you get individual help to better apply these concepts to your life, along with a library of next-level, blow-your-mind coaching tools and concepts that I just can't fit in a podcast episode. It's also where you can hang out, get coached, and nerd out about all things thought work and feminist mindset with other podcast listeners just like you and me. It's my favorite place on earth, and it will change your life, I guarantee it. Come join us at www.unfuckyourbrain.com/society. I can't wait to see you there. Did you know that Take Back Your Brain, my first book, is available on hardcover, ebook, and audiobook? And I read the audiobook myself. So if you love the podcast, you are going to want to make sure that you get a copy of Take Back Your Brain, How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out. It is everything you need to understand your brain and change your brain, start to finish, in one book. It is available wherever books and audiobooks are sold. And if you love it, all I ask is that you please leave us a review on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Goodreads, wherever you get it from or wherever you share your thoughts about books. Those reviews really help the algorithms boost the book, show it to more people, share it, keep the book circulating longer. And we all know that every woman in the world needs to understand how to change her brain, not so that she can think what I want her to think, but so that she can decide for herself what to think. That's really what all of this work is about. That's what all of us are doing with the podcast. And that is now what the book is here to do as well.